目からビームが出ちゃったり
Happiness Charge did it. Actually, I think a little more credit should go to DigiCarrot. We open this week with our protagonist pondering ways to help in Elle's development as the child of destiny. I'm just hoping that includes her growing proportionally right. Again, I must ask, why is the baby's head bigger than the 18-year-old's? Needless to say, the animation in this one was a little wonky, but yeah, as a result, they did start to overthink things a little.
もっと豪華なご飯じゃなきゃダメなのかもでもエルちゃんが好きなのはおにぎりとパ
Besides, you really don't want to get them hooked on the fancy stuff. True story, my niece's favorite food is ikra, and you have any idea how freaking expensive that stuff is? Also, obvious lesson of the day is obvious. Anyway, much like the previous changing of the seasons, they altered the opening yet again to reflect the new general in, Pumbaa? Yeah, I guess we're back to swine again, which they even point out later in this episode, thanks to a slightly racist comment from Mashiro of all people. Regardless, like Kabuton, I think this is a good design that matches well with the character's personality that we'll get to in just a bit. Again, as long as this character isn't voiced by Seth Rogen. Seriously, he's not even that funny of an actor or comedian. Later, the Precure decide to take Elle on her first trip to the local zoo. There they saw the park mascot, T-Rex, which is an odd choice to go with an extinct animal, unless they're doing like a collab with Jurassic World, which why would you do that? Anyway, they took Elle to the petting zoo area, where the soon-to-be 6th Ranger was already flexing her special abilities, including being able to talk to animals. No, hold off on the Lion King jokes, for now. Though, more interestingly, we actually got a little more world building for Skyland while they weren't in Skyland. Yeah, y'all couldn't have done this before we were around the halfway point for this series. But yeah, they revealed that not only did giraffes not exist in their world, which makes sense as they are kind of abnormal animals even in our world, but the similar animals they did have in Skyland more took on the colors of their surroundings, which of course was a whole lot of light blue, in order to properly camouflage, showing how different environments can result in different evolutions. And while I certainly can't speak for the exact science behind this stuff, it does make sense in this context, and more importantly, like the food scene from last week, does highlight how the worlds can develop in similar yet different ways. Good stuff. Granted, I'm just curious of whether or not they have different typings. Continuing their day at the zoo, they of course had to stop by the lion's den, but as is so often the case IRL, the lazy bumps were sleeping. Tsubasa explained this was because lions are more nocturnal animals, which I legit didn't know, so that's actually a fun little fact. However, their talking did end up waking up Mufasa.
Princess, ライオンさんがなんて言ってるかわかりますか?
I think he said he's still waiting on his residuals. This ended up opening discussions of what sort of other abilities their future teammate might develop and what the Precure should do to foster such. Of course, they asked the child caregiver for advice, and she provided the lesson of the day that they just needed to chill. I mean, okay, Akia did bring up some good points that rather than training her as the special, it would likely be better in the long term to just raise Elle normally and let her learn new stuff on her own. A bit of an obvious and on-the-nose moral, but still a good one. And it at least gave a good spotlight to Ageha, who's mostly acted as this team's cheat code in battle, rather than the one adult on this team who takes care of kids for a living. On that note though, it was time for the new general to make his big debut. Oh, and in case you're wondering what happened to Batamonda,
I don't know.
Yeah, from what I've been told, the producers decided to just not do scenes of the villains hanging out and interacting with each other because apparently they were unpopular with the focus groups, which needless to say has done a lot more damage this season than anything else, as we still don't really know who these guys are working for or how they're even tagging out. I mean, last we saw of Evil Judai, he got talked down to, and then I guess he went to finish off his semester at Duelist Academy. Well, just don't tell him that 4 Kids isn't going to dub his final season. Actually, that might be for the best. Anyway, we were introduced to the new general doing Suburito, which is an exercise in kendo in which you swing the sword around in a specific motion. I've actually done it myself, in particular with a stick that was more like a freaking oar. This is all based off of a legend in which Musashi Miyamoto actually used a weapon forged from a bolt oar to defeat Kojiro Sasaki and his longsword. Though, I guess this guy figured, why sell for just a silly little oar, and why not just go with the whole damn tree? But yeah, Minotone here, who I'm just gonna stick with calling Pumbaa, was very clearly characterized by that intro and his kabuki face paint as an almost stereotypical samurai following in the teachings of Musashi and his bushido. As a result, he didn't even purposely cause any havoc, and instead formally waited for the Precure to find him, thanks to his very presence just scaring off the animals. Needless to say, this was a pretty cool new antagonist who even created an awesome first monster of the week. Also, for some reason, it says this thing is my ancestor. What nonsense. Strangely enough, the transformation sequence featured Mashiro taking the lead, even though I'd argue the spotlight cure for this episode was Ageha. I mean, yeah, later, Mashiro is going to contribute something significant, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel quite right not to go with Ageha here. Anyway, even though the animation was just okay this week, and they did kind of cheap out by reusing this running animation of Sora, it was kind of more than made up for just by the fact that the Precure were fighting a fire-breathing dinosaur. Now that's freaking metal. We also got a good scene of L taking influence from Sora, which will highlight the bigger message of this episode. However, I think the best bit ended up coming from Pumbaa. So, we got a super honorable antagonist for this arc, which, yeah, while a little played out, is at least a lot more characterization than we've gotten from both of his predecessors, so I'll take it cliches and all. Anyway, he still did want a proper fight with them, so they restarted, and one buff later, they defeated Grimlock. Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for Pumbaa at this point. Anyway, the episode ended with the Precure proudly realizing that L was developing and taking after them, specifically Sora and Mashiro through her picture book, pretty much confirming that our original duo are the actual moms of this show. On that note, Akira, who's gonna turn into quite the MILF in a couple months, cameoed this week. This was a solid start to the next arc of the series, mostly thanks to the new general. As someone who's actually trained in kendo, I really appreciate the subtle touches they use to establish his obsession with bushido on top of his honor-obsessed personality. L was also decently characterized in this one, though much like the rest of this episode, I also appreciate that they're not over-pushing her eventual ascension into Sixth Rangerdom. Of the secondary writers of the show, I think Mio Inoue has been the unsung MVP. Her writing is very solid, not just providing some strong character building, but at least a little world building as well, which, as I've said, this season has kind of been in need of. It doesn't have to be much, just something that at least gives us an idea of what Skyland is to make it feel more like a lived-in world. The fact she did this when they weren't even in the kingdom was all the more impressive. Likewise, I liked how just through a little exercise, they managed to quickly establish Pumbaa's characterization. Again, the Honorable Samurai is more than a little cliched, but I do appreciate that they're at least going all in with this character. He's not just a mindless brute, and yet is already proving to be quite the powerhouse, making him a much more interesting antagonist than his cohorts. Hell, even with some iffy animation, his first fight was at least quite the spectacle. As a result, like in The Lion King, he kind of stole the show, but the stuff with L was also pretty good. I did like the lesson that kids can develop on their own, which feels more like a message for the parents, but I guess you could also say they're encouraging everyone not to overthink things. I mean, our protagonist did that, which led to some good comedy, even if they were acting a little goofier than usual. For now though, I think they're wisely slowly building up Elle's power set, and in turn, anticipation for her Precure debut. It's good characterization, and doesn't feel overwhelming. And overall, this was a nice little reset for the series going into the next arc. There are still some overarching issues, especially in regards to the Ondargu Empire as a whole, but at least Pumbaa is here to take charge.
They call me Mr. Pig!
If if you haven't seen it yet, we actually managed to get up a review for a Precure crossover doujinshi in celebration of the upcoming All-Stars F movie that's gonna feature the return of those flashlights, so yeah, there's another thing that you can add to the list of possible Fs for this movie. Yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, they actually tried to say that the F in the title represents a lot of different words that start with F, including final, which I'll believe it when I see it. But yeah, appropriately, this book features the return of the Miracle Lights, though thankfully they don't take away from a Precure version of the Destroyer of Worlds. Anyway, feel free to check it out. And until next time though, farewell for
You
now, my
must
friends,
avenge
and
my death, Kimba. I mean, Simba.
it's okay, dude, it's a common mistake.